Very pop upon Magic Treehouse. Lions at lunchtime. Chapter 1. Before lunch. Jack and Annie were walking home from the grocery store. Jack's pack was heavy. It held a big jar of peanut butter and loaf bread. Are you going to have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? Said Annie. Or a peanut butter and honey sandwich? Jack started to answer, but stopped. Oh, man, he whispered. What is it? Said Annie. Look at that, said Jack. Pointed to the edge of Frog Creek woods. The shadow stood a small, delicate animal. It looked like a tiny deer. It's a sign, whispered Annie. Remember when we saw the rabbit? It was a sign of the Wild West. The deer-like creature leaped to the woods. Jack and Annie didn't stop to think. They followed as fast as they could. Jack's heavy back thumped against his back as he ran. Finally, they stopped and looked around. Where did she go? He asked. I don't see her, said Annie. Oh, wow, said Amy, pointing up. There was the magic treehouse. There was the magic treehouse. It was been shining in the moon sun. At the top of the tallest tree in the woods, the rope ladder swayed in the shadows below. Where's Morgan? Said Annie. Morgan the Fae wasn't waving at them from the window. She wasn't even at the window. I don't know. Let's go up, said Jack. They climbed up the ladder and went into the treehouse. Sunlight streamed through the window. It lit a stack of books and two scrolls on the corner. The ancient scrolls held the answers to riddles Jack and Annie solved earlier. Jack took off his heavy pack. Did Morgan leave us a third riddle? Said Annie. Looking for someone, said a soft voice. Jack and Annie whirled around. Morgan Le Fay had appeared out of nowhere. She looked ancient and lovely in the bright light. Do you still want to become master librarians? She asked Jack and Annie. So you can help me in my work? Yes, said they said together. Wonderful, Morgan said. Then she reached into a robe and pulled out a scroll. You've solved 2 riddles so far, she said. Here's your third. She handed the scroll to Amy. And for your research, she pulled a book out from her robe and handed it to Jack. The book's cover said, The Plains of Africa. Africa? Said Jack. Oh, ma'am, I always wanted to go there. He opened a book. He and Annie started to add a picture. Just hordes of zebra, tall giraffes, big animals with horns, tiny deer-like creatures. Hey, that's the animal that led us here, said Annie. A Thoman's gazelle, I believe. Morgan said. Where are the lions? Said Jack. You'll find out, said Morgan. Maybe we need to go to this trip, said Jack. Morgan smiled. No, go ahead. Make your wish now. Annie pointed at the picture. I wish we could go there, she said. Be careful, said Morgan. Just keep an eye out. For what? Said Jack. The lions, of course, she said. Wait, said Jack. Too late. The wind had started to blow. The treehouse started to spin. Jack squeezed his eyes shut. The treehouse blew faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 2. Jump, beasts! Jump! Bright light flooded the treehouse again. A whistling sound came from the outside the window. Annie peeked out and laughed. Hey, there, she said. Jack looked out too. A giraffe was eating leaves off the tree. It had a sweet, goofy face. Jack looked at the woods beyond the giraffe. He couldn't believe his eyes. He saw a huge grassy plain, a wide river, and tons of birds and animals. I had imagined in one place. Giraffes and zebras were one side of the river where Jamie and Annie were. The Thomas gazelles and the bighorned animals were on the other side. Where are the lions? Said Jack. I don't know, said Annie. You think it's always this crowded? Let's find out, said Jack. He picked up the book on Africa and looked at the picture of animals. He read it aloud. Every year in late spring, thousands of zebras and gazelles and millions of wild beasts migrate from the dry plains of Tanzania to Kenya. What does migrate mean? Said Annie. Jack pushed his glasses into place. It means they go someplace else for part of the year, like birds going south for the winter. Oh, right, said Annie. Jack turned the page to read more. Before they are safe in Kenya, the animals must cross the Mara River. Zebras go first, then the wild beasts. The tiny gazelles swim last. Oh, said Annie in a sad voice. What's wrong? Said Jack. Poor beasts. She looked out the window. They seem afraid. On the far side of the river, the horned animals were standing at the edge of the deep bank of the river. They stared down nervously at the rushing water. Jump, beasts! Jump! Annie shouted. Don't be silly. They can't hear you, said Jack. He studied the board plane. I wonder where the lions are, he said. I don't know, but I have to go, said Annie. Go where? Said Jack. To the river to help them, she said. Help who? Said Jack. Those wild beasts on the other side, said Annie. I have to help them migrate. Are you nuts? Said Jamie. Annie held Jack the scroll and started out of the treehouse. Wait a second, said Jack. You haven't even read Morgan's riddle yet. And he stopped on the ladder. Read it now, she said. Jack unrolled the ancient scroll and read aloud. I'm the color of gold, and as sweet as I can be. But beware of the dangers that's all around me. What am I? Annie started down again. Annie! We'll look for the answer in a minute, said Annie. What are you doing? Jack called, but there was no stopping her. Jack watched as she hopped off the ladder. Then she started to walk through the tall grass between the zebras and giraffes. I don't believe her, he said to himself. He quickly put the Africa book into his pack. He started down the ladder. Then he stepped onto the ground. He looked around carefully. The giraffes were eating the tree leaves. The zebras were grazing on the grass. Tons of birds flapped overhead. This is okay, he thought. He had just one little question. Where are the lions? Chapter 3. Disaster. Come on, Jack, Annie called. She was almost to the river. Just a minute, he shouted. He wanted to study the giraffes and zebras. He pulled out the Africa book and found a picture of giraffes. He read, The giraffe is the tallest animal in the world. Its legs alone can be 6 feet tall, and its hooves can be big as dinner plates. The giraffe has very powerful kick, which makes it dangerous to attack. For this reason, lions tend to avoid giraffes. Jack pulled his note and wrote, Notes on Africa. Lions avoid giraffes. He turned the page to read more. Zebras live in family groups. As no two zebras have exactly the same pattern of stripes, every baby zebra must learn its own mother's pattern. Jack studied the zebras, trying to see their different patterns. But in the hazy afternoon light, the stripes made him dizzy. He blinked to clear his head, and read more. Zebras are the first to cross the river because they eat the coarsest grass. After they thin down the top layer, the wild beasts arrive and eat the next layer. They prepare the grass for the gazelles who come last. Wow, thought Jack. Each animal depends on the one that goes before. He wrote, Animals uncontacted. Jack heard Annie shouting from the river bank, Jump, beasts, jump! You can do it! Don't be afraid. Come on. He looked up. Annie herself was jumping as she called to the wild beasts. Jack sighed. "I better stop her before there's trouble," he thought. He put away the Africa book and his notebook, then jogged towards the river. His pack was very heavy and lumpy, bumping against his back. Forgotten to take out the jar of peanut butter and the loaf of bread. Jack decided to leave them at the treehouse. He turned to go back. Just then, Annie's shouting stopped. Jack looked at the river. She had vanished. "Annie," he called. No answer. "Where was she?" "Annie!" Jack shouted. She had completely disappeared. "Oh man," said Jack. The trip had barely begun and already disaster had struck. He forgot about the stuff in his bag. He just ran as fast as he could. He moved his way between the grazing zebras and giraffes as he raced to the river. "Help!" called Annie. Chapter 4, Mud Bath. Jack looked over the edge of the riverbank. Annie had fallen into a pool of mud near the water. The thick black mud was up to her chest. "I slipped," she said. "It feels like quicksand." Jack threw down his jacket and caught his knees. "Be careful," said Annie. Don't slip too." Jack pointed to a tangle of old tree roots sticking out of the bark. "Grab those," he said, and reached for the roots. "Too far," she said, breathing hard. "I'm sinking." She was sinking. The mud was up to her neck. "Hold on, Janie." Jack looked around wildly. He saw a fallen tree branch near the bank. He raced to it and picked it up and carried it back to Annie. Only her head and arms stuck out of the mud now. Then Jack held out the branch. Annie grabbed it. "Hold tight," said Jack. "I'll drag you to the roots." He started pulling on the branch. "I'm still sinking," Annie wailed. The mud was up to her chin. "Come on," said Jack. "You can do it." "I know you can. Try. Just then Jack heard a splash. Looked up. On the other side of the wide river, a wild beast had jumped into the water. Another jumped and another. They were headed towards Jack and Annie. "Hold on tight," said Jack. He pulled on the stick again. Annie moved a tiny bit. "Hey, Jack, on the moon, it felt like I weighed 10 pounds, said Annie, "and this mud feels like I weigh a ton." "Considerate, Annie," said Jack, trying to not slip down the bank. "I am." The lead wild beasts were halfway across, fleeing towards them. The more wild beasts were jumping into the water. "It's now or never," said Jack. He took a deep breath. He pulled really hard. Just then, a shadow passed over them. Jack looked up. "Uh-oh," he said. A huge vulture circled overhead. "It thinks you're near the end," said Jack. "Oh, get out of here!" Annie shouted at the vulture. "I'm fine." A burst of fury, she let go of the branch. She lunged for the roots. She grabbed them. "Yes!" cried Jack. "Pull!" Slowly, Annie pulled herself out. She was covered with black mud from head to toe. Jack helped her on the bank, getting mud all over himself. "See?" Annie shook her fist at the vulture. "I'm not fine. Now beat it." But the giant ugly bird still circled. "Come on, let's get away from him," said Jack. He pushed his glasses into place. "Rats," he said. Now his glasses were muddy. He tried to clean his hands in the grass. "Oh no," shouted Annie. Jack turned to it. "The wild beasts will get stuck in the mud hole," she cried. She waved her arms at the wild beast struggling to swim across the river. "Not here," she shouted. "Not here." The frantic swimmers kept coming. Chapter 5. "Ha ha! No! Oh no! No!" shouted Annie. She raced down the bank until she reached a sandy, clear spot. Here!" she called. The wild beast followed her with their wild eyes. Jack watched in disbelief as the swimmers changed their course. Slowly, the wild beast swam to where Annie stood. She waved him like a traffic policeman. Jack grabbed his backpack. "Annie," cried, "let's go before we get trampled." Keep it up, she shouted to the wild beast as she took off after Jack. They ran farther up the river away from the incoming wild beast. Finally, they stopped to catch their breath. They looked back. Everything seemed fine. The wild beasts were scrambling safely over the river bank. Soon they would graze over the grass prepared by the zebras. Good work, said to Annie. Thanks, she said. Okay, now for a riddle. No, first we got to get clean, said Jack. You look like you're in a mud suit. High-pitched laughter rang through the air, sounding like mocking and mean. Jack and Annie turned around. They saw two spotted brown animals standing in the tall grass. The creatures had bodies like dogs, but with sloping backs. They laughed again. Ha ha, said Annie. You don't look great yourself. What are they? Said Jack. He took out the book. He tried not to get mud on it as he looked for a picture. When he found it, he read aloud. On the African plains, a hyena is the ruling predator after the lion. It makes a sound similar to a high-pitched human laugh. What does predator mean? Says Annie. It means to catch things that eat them, said Jack. Oh, said Annie. Yuck. Two hyenas laughed again, and they moved closer to Jack and Annie. Quietly, Jack read more. A hyena has reputation for being a thief and a coward. Let's see if they're cowards, whispered Annie. Let's try to scare them. The hyenas laughed and moved a little closer. How? Jack asked. Act like a monster, said Annie. Now, Jack and Annie made their terrible monster faces. They put out their hands and rushed at the hyenas. Arg! They shouted. The hyenas yelped and scurried off. Scaredy cats! Annie shouted after them. Come on, said Jack. Annie and Jack took off in the other direction. They ran towards the bend in the river. Jack heard the hyena laughter again. It sounded far away. Hey, maybe we can wash over there, said Annie. She pointed to the edge of the forest. There was a small pond surrounded by tall grass. Zebras were drinking the water. Yes, said Jack. It's safe enough for them to drink. The zebras ignored them as they watched towards the pond. When they reached the edge of the water, Jack set his heavy pack down in the dry grass, glanced around. No lions were in sight. But he heard something. On the far side of the pond, something very big was coming out of the trees. Chapter 6. Spick and span. Be still, said Jack. Jack and Annie stood frozen, and the elephant stepped out of the shadows. It waddled towards the front and dipped its trunk into the water. Oh, wow, said Annie. Jack breathed a sigh of relief. An elephant wasn't going to chase them and eat them. Still, the elephant was huge. Let's sneak away, said Jack. But I want to watch, said Annie. Fine, said Jack. I'm going to solve the riddle myself. I'll meet you back at the treehouse. He turned to go. A spray of water rained down on him. It came from behind. He snouted with surprise and looked back. Elma's trunk was pointed straight at Annie. Cool, she cried. He's giving me a shower. The elephant sprayed her again, then again. The milk slowly rolled off her face, her braids, her t-shirt, and her shorts, her legs, and her sneakers. I guess the elephant doesn't like dirty kids, said Annie, laughing. Her eyes were squeezed shut. Finally, she was clean and soaking wet. Now it's your turn, she said to Jack. Jack stepped towards and shut his eyes tight. A blast of water hit him. It didn't feel like a shower. A strong shower. When Jack was clean, the elephant let out a grunt. He started to splash himself with water. Thanks, said Annie. Yeah, thanks, said Jack. I'm spick and span now, said Annie. When the sun dries me off, I like being new. Good, said Jack. Now we can get serious. He picked up his heavy pack. You have to figure out the answer to the riddle so we can leave this place before we run into real trouble. He looked around nervously. Were there the lions? He wondered. A small bird fluttered near his head. Hi, Annie said to the bird. Jack turned back to her. According to the riddle, we are looking for something gold and sweet. What do you want? Annie asked the bird. twittered and flew around Jack and Annie. His feathers were dull and gray, but it was a bright, happy manner. Annie, listen to me, not the bird, said Jack. The bird kept fluttering around them. She's trying to tell us something, said Annie. Jack let out a long sigh. You're driving me crazy today, he said. But I feel like she needs our help, said Annie. Maybe her baby's still out of the nest. Annie, you can't save every animal in Africa, said Jack. This bird is important, said Annie. Trust me. But darted towards the trees, landed on a branch, and crooked his head at them. She said, follow, said Annie. The bird headed into the forest, and he started after them. Don't go in there, said Jack. You might run into... There was no need to finish. The bird and Annie had disappeared into the trees. A snake or a lion, Jack said to himself. Come on, Annie cried. Jack moaned, pulled out his back and ran. The peanut butter jar thumped against his back. Chapter 7. Hi there. The forest was cooler in the sunny plains. It was filled with shadows and bird calls. Where are you? Jack shouted. Here, said Annie. She found her in a thick glade. Bright rays streamed between the trees. Green leaves and vines swayed in the dimpled light. The little gray bird sat in a tree, twittering at them. Yeah, what's that? Said Annie. She pointed round brown things hanging from a low branch. Bees buzzed around it. If that's her nest, it's a pretty weird nest, said Annie. That's not a nest. It's a beehive. Don't you see the bees? Yikes, said Annie. Stepped back from the tree. The little bird darted at the beehive and pecked at it. What's she doing? Said Annie. The bird kept picking at the hive. I don't know. Maybe she's nuts at you, said Jack. Look her up in the book, said Annie. See if it says she's nuts. Are you kidding? Said Jack. That nutty bird isn't going to be in this book. Just look. Jack opened his Africa book. He kept turning the pages. Just as he thought, there was no great bird in the book. Forget it, he said. Keep looking, said Annie. Jack turned one more page. There it was, a little gray bird, a beehive, and a tall painted warrior with a spear. I don't believe this, said Jack, and read aloud. The bird is called a honey guide. It's both friend and a helper to the Maasai people, an African tribe known for their fierce fighting skills and bravery. Aye, honey guide, Annie called to the bird. I knew you were important. Jack kept reading. The honey guide leads a Maasai expedition to a beehive. The bird waits for her to scatter the bees and take the honey. Then Jack feasts on the honeycomb. That's cool, said Jack. They work together, like the zebras and the wild beasts and gazelles. Yeah, said Annie, and she wants us to be her helpers. We have to scatter the bees and leave her the honeycomb. How do we do that? Said Jack. Look back at the book. It didn't say how. Well, maybe we could wave these at them, said Annie. She pointed to some bright green plants that looked like giant fans. Jack pulled up the weeds. He waved them near the tree. The bees scattered. Next, Jack grabbed the tree branch and jingled it. The hive fell to the ground and broke open. Annie stooped and stuck her finger into the golden honeycomb. Yummy, she said when she tasted the honey. Try it. Jack stuck his finger in the honeycomb. The warrior stared at Jack and Annie. We're helping one of your honey guides, said Annie. The warrior was still as a statue. We didn't mean to steal anything, said Jack. In fact, it's all yours. We had enough. Lots of good honey still there, Annie said, smiling. The warrior narrowed his eyes. Is he angry? Jack wondered. I'm sorry, we're trespassing, said Jack. We come in peace. In fact, we bring gifts. He picked up the backpack and held it out to the warrior. The warrior still didn't move. This, Jack held up his foot. Nothing. Jack reached into his pack, pulled out the big jar of peanut butter. Peanut butter! He held out the lava bread. Bread! Hey, How about a peanut butter and honey sandwich? Yum, Annie said, watching the warrior. The warrior stared at the food. We'll show you, said Jack. Jack unwrapped the bread. His hands shook. Jack, Annie opened the jar. We don't have anything to spread it with, she said. Use your fingers, said Jack. Excuse me, Annie said to the warrior. I have to use my fingers, but they're pretty clean. An elephant just do it, Annie, said Jack. Okay. Spread the peanut butter onto a slice of bread with your fingers. At the same time, Jack spread the honey from the beehive on another slice. Jack and Annie put the slices of bread together. Ta-ta, said Annie, handing the sandwich to the warrior. The warrior took the sandwich, but he didn't eat it. Just looked at it. Let's make sandwich for us too, Jack said. He doesn't have to eat alone. They quickly made 2 more sandwiches. See, like this, said Annie. She bit into her sandwich. Yum, yum. Jack took a bite too. He said. It was really good. Finally, the warrior bit into his sandwich, chewed slowly. This is called a picnic, said Annie. They ate their sandwich in silence. When they finished, Jack screwed the back on the peanut butter jar. Not bad, huh? He said. The warrior smiled with a kind, dignified smile. Jack and Annie smiled back at him. Then the warriors turned gracefully and vanished into the trees. Oh man, said Jack. Part of him wanted to follow the silent warrior through the shadowy forest. Ready? Annie asked softly. Jack nodded. Annie started to go. Wait, said Jack. Put away the peanut butter and bread. We're not going to back the treehouse, right? We're not going to do anything silly like rescue anything or chase birds, right? Those aren't silly, said Annie. Don't forget that the bird gave us the answer to the riddle. Oh, right, said Jack. Looked at the little honey guy on the ground, picking at the honeycomb. Thanks, Jack said to the bird. Have a good feast, said Annie. Jack put on his pack. Penny and Annie started out of the forest. When they passed the pond, they saw the elephant still splashing in the water, lifted its trunk. It seemed to be waving at them. See ya! Annie shouted, waving back. They rounded the bend in the river, then started through the tall grass. As they walked back towards the treehouse, they saw the wild beasts in distance. There was still some crossing the river. They saw a family of zebras grazing together. They saw lone giraffes walking from tree to tree, eating the leaves. And they saw a bunch of lions living in the shade of the tree, the same tree that the treehouse was in. Oops, said Annie. Jack's heart gave a jump. So there are, he said. Chapter 9, Tiptoe. Jack and Annie crouched in the tall grass. There was a big lion, 3 lions, and a bunch of cubs. I think they're sleeping, whispered Annie. Yeah, said Jack, but for how long? He pulled the Africa book from his pack and opened it. Found a picture of a lion sleeping under a tree. Read in a whispery voice. A pride of lions had eaten a rest for a few hours. The other, what did they have for lunch? And I broke in their desk, said Annie. He kept reading, sensing that the lions are not hunting at the moment. The other animals graze nearby. They can graze. We're safe, said Annie. She started to stand. Wait, Jack pushed. Not so fast. He turned around. Words in the book seemed true. The first answer didn't be bothered by the lions at all. Might be safe, but I'm not sure about us, said Jack. We need a plan. What if we wait till they leave, said Annie. That could take hours, said Jack. Plus, they might be hungry again by then. Oh, right, said Annie. Here's the plan. We tiptoe, said Jack. Tiptoe? Yeah. That's your whole plan, said Annie. Yeah, tiptoe to the rope ladder. Jack very quiet. Good plan. And he teased. Just do it, said Jack. He stood up slowly. Annie stood with him, getting slowly tiptoeing through the grass very slowly. The lion flicked his tail. Jack and Annie froze. Then his tail was still again and again. Suddenly, high-pitched laughter split the air. Jack and Annie stopped. The hyenas are back. They're still standing off to the side, watching Jack and Annie. Jack and Annie made silent mock-up faces and shook their fists. But the hyenas only laughed some more. Big lion stared lazily, opened his golden eyes. Jack felt higher rise on the back of his neck, but he didn't move an inch. Lion lifted his head and yawned. His giant teeth gleamed in the sunlight. The lion turned his head as he looked around sleepily. Jack held his breath as the lion's gaze rested on him. The lion sat straight up. His piercing yellow eyes met Jack's. Jack's heart raced. His mind raced. He remembered something he read. Lions avoid giraffes. Jack looked around. There was a giraffe walking towards the tree that the magic treehouse was in. Suddenly, he had a new plan. Get under that giraffe, he whispered. Now you're the one who's nuts, and he whispered back. Jack grabbed her and pulled her over to the giraffe and underneath it. The giraffe's legs were so long, Jack and Annie could stand up under it. Jack's head barely brushed the giraffe's golden belly. The tall creature froze for a few seconds. Then she moved slowly towards the tree. Jack and Annie walked in the same rhythm as the giraffe. They got closer and closer to the treehouse, closer and closer to the pride of lions. The big lion stood up, watched them moving under the giraffe. The rope ladder was just a few feet away. Jack and Annie dashed away from under the giraffe to the rope ladder. Annie scrambled up first. Jack followed right behind her. As they climbed, the lion growled and leapt at the ladder. The hyenas laughed. Jack climbed faster than he'd ever climbed. He leapt after Annie to the treehouse. Annie already unrolled the scroll. The riddle was gone. Its place was one shining word, honey. Jack grabbed the Pennsylvania book. He opened it and found a picture of Rock Creek Woods. I wish we could go there, he said. Just then the giraffe stuck her head through the window. Bye, honey, said Annie. And she kissed the giraffe on the nose. The wind started to blow. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster, and everything was still, absolutely still. Chapter 10. After lunch. Jack opened his eyes. His heart was still racing. Hyena's laughter still rang in his ears. We made it, said Annie. Yes, said Jack. But it was very close. Jack took another moment to calm down. He pulled the Africa book out of his pack and put it with the other books. Annie put the scroll with the other two scrolls. The giraffe was the true honey on that trip, she said. Sweet and golden with danger around it. Yep, Jack said. Now we have just one riddle to go. Yep, said Annie. Ready? Ready. She started down the ladder. Jack followed. Then, when they hit the ground, they walked through the sunlit woods. It's time for lunch, said Jack. I'm full from our picnic, said Annie. Same here, said Jack. What do we tell our mom, said Annie. We say we ate our sandwiches coming back from the store, said Jack. Well, she asked why, said Annie. Oh, just we had a picnic with the Maasai warriors in Africa, said Jack. Annie laughed. Right, she said, because we didn't want him to be mad at us for taking his honey. Right, said Jack. The honey from a beehive that a honey guy let us do. Right, said Annie. And that happened after an elephant gave me a shower and we scared off the two hyenas. Right, said Jack. And after you fell into a puddle because you were helping 1,000,000 wild beasts migrate across the river. Right, said Annie. And all that was before a giraffe saved us from a lion. Right, said Jack. Jack and Annie left the Frog Creek woods and started up the sunny street. It was silent for a moment. Then Jack pushed his glasses into place. We better say we ate our sandwiches on the way home from the store, he said. Right, said Annie. And if Mom asks why, started Jack. We just Say it's a really long story, said Annie. Right, said Jack, with like 10 chapters. Annie laughed. Good plan, she said. Very good plan, said Jack. They crossed their yard. They went up the steps and through the front door. We're back, Annie shouted. Great, called their mom. Ready for lunch?